Welcome back everybody. In this episode we fit our Frontrunner roof platform onto our Next Gen Ranger Wildtrak. Now it's a little bit fiddly, but the end result is really fantastic. And I've worked through all the little issues you might come across and come up with a fair few solutions that I'll show you as part of this video. So come along as we show you how. So this video will suit anyone that's looking to fit a roof platform onto their Next Gen Ranger or pretty much any ute, but it is specifically tailored towards the Ranger itself. So if you're looking to fit a roof platform, I'll show you a few little tricks inside that mean you don't need to drop the whole headliner. We just need to get access to the four corners around the inside of the cab, and you only really need to remove a few little trims, some grab handles and stuff like that, which will make your life a lot easier. That is, unless you want to drop the whole lot down to soundproof the underside of the roof, which I would highly recommend, but I honestly thought when I bought this that it would be a bolt-on affair. I didn't think I'd have to disassemble too much, but as it turns out, I had to go pretty much the whole hog, and I am actually really happy with the end result. Now, I don't add these things on just for the sake of accessorizing the four-wheel drive. They have to have a function. So at the end of this video, I'll show you a number of accessories that we can quickly put on, take off to change how we use this rack, along with a triple M tub rack that we've got on the rear. This whole setup is working towards having a rooftop tent on, an area where we can strap swags down and do some remote touring where we're not necessarily towing the caravan, camp trailer or anything like that. Now, to be honest, this is all I've run on all my previous vehicles up until this point. It's just been now that we're starting to have rooftop tents and swags and stuff like that, I think our roof platform will be really handy to actually strap things down. Now, to get a full roof platform and a backbone system, you're looking at around $1,500. So that's getting quite expensive. But I've actually found a hybrid system that a number of different manufacturers have that works quite well. So you've got your backbone that you see here, and then instead of having a full roof platform, you actually just have crossbars that go in between the two rails that go down either side of your vehicle. Now, for me, that ticks a lot of boxes. It keeps the height down. So that keeps a nice slim profile. It's very affordable. This Frontrunner Slimsport rack I actually got on special for under $900. And while I don't think there's a huge weight advantage with this system, it does obviously keep the weight down to the minimal that you definitely need to do to have a platform style system bolted on to the roof of your particular four-wheel drive or dual cab ute. Now, one thing to consider with the roof loadings that each of the manufacturers put out is that that roof loading not only includes what you're strapping or securing onto the roof of your vehicle, but also the rack system that you're installing or clamping on. So in the case of the Rangers, they've got a roof loading of around 85 kilos. So if you start adding in a whole heap of accessories as far as platforms, clamps, crossbars, and all that sort of thing, it starts eating into the payload, exactly the same as in the back of your vehicle or in your caravan or anything like that. Now, the one compromise with this system, which is pretty much going to be any system where you're not utilizing the rails, is that there is some disassembly of the interior required. However, you only need to remove certain sections to gain access to the four corners, which I'll show you through this video, and that's what's going to make it a little bit longer. So let me get rid of all this. I'll bring over the components of the Frontrunner Slimsport rack. I'll run you through how that all goes together, and then what we're going to do is actually remove these rails, which for the most part is pretty easy. We'll pull a little bit of the interior apart so we can get to the bolts and the mounting holes, and then I'll show you how it all goes back together. And so essentially you get all of this, which looks a little bit complicated, but really it's quite simple. So you've got your two backbones that run down either side of the cab. You have this fairing that sits on the front, and this is essentially a wind deflector. And I'm really curious about how noisy this particular rack will be. Now, this fairing does actually come in two different options, and you'll see that it's profiled to suit the roof of the cab. You have a little seal, which I'll show you shortly, but you can get this in a shorter profile that includes a provision for a light bar. The one consideration if you get the light bar option is that the front rail actually sits lower to accommodate that light bar because you mount the light bar onto the rail, I'm assuming. I've gone the full one because I don't need a light bar or anything like that. We don't do any heavy outback night driving. I might regret that with the trip we're doing next year, but for now, I've just gone the real simple option. You've got these really interesting wings that sit on the front, and they actually hide the mounting point in behind. But I'm assuming these are associated with wind deflection and reducing the noise a little bit. And while some of the accessories are actually quite expensive, there are a number on their website that are like $10 and stuff like that. So I'll show you some of them through the process of this actual video, including a Starlink mini mount that I ended up getting, which I thought was actually quite affordable and obviously works quite well with the Frontrunner products. You get your 7 crossbars, and these are real heavy duty crossbar. They feel solid, and I think they'll work quite well. Interestingly, they're kind of like your 4020s, where they've got a slot in the top and the bottom. And I think these should work really, really well for mounting accessories onto, because you can mount them underneath, on top, and most importantly, the backbones actually have slots, so you can slide things in and out without having to sort of fiddle around with popping them down into the slot itself. That is a real nifty feature, which I'm going to show you once we start putting things on and off, because I think it will make it really easy to change over what we actually mount and strap down onto the roof without having to go to too much drama. Because as I said, I like to pull most of the accessories off when we don't need them, so it's a nice bare rack, and I like to change things over depending on the trips that we're doing and the uses I have for the racks in particular. You also get all the hardware, and one little tip and trick is that I like to sit down and go through the instructions and actually partly assemble everything so it's all ready to go when we go to install it. Now, the one thing I will note with the Dometic instructions, and this has come up from a few videos, is that they're fairly vague, and it's taken me a while to get my head around the installation. Obviously, the instructions cover both the Wildtrak models that actually have the roof rails fitted, but it's also got a set of instructions for if you don't have any of this gear on. But nonetheless, they do provide all these different packers that you can use for all your different types of installations. So if you've got a base model, there should be something that will work for you. And then if you've got the more premium models, I think I've worked out the right bits and pieces to use to get that working really, really well. And I nearly forgot, there's these stiffeners that actually go in the back half of the roof platform itself. They actually bolt on to the last 2 rails, and I'll touch on how that goes together once we get to the assembly. But this will just stiffen up the back of the platform so that it doesn't move from side to side, which is a pretty cool feature. I'm interested to see if that's actually really required, but they say to install it, so we will do that anyway. So the first step is obviously to assemble the rack itself. I've actually just laid out all the slats and put one backbone down along the side. Down behind me here, I've set up another table, and I've just moved everything over there that I don't need at this point, that I can just transfer over as we're constructing this rack itself. So I've laid each of my slats out and lined them up with the holes, and I'll put the first backbone on. Just pay attention to the flange that comes out. So this is the front, and it needs to be sitting out. And then on the rear, it needs to be sitting in, just to make sure you've got it around the right way. Here is all my hardware. So we have 28 of these 25mm N6 bolts, and they have a T30 Torx bit sort of head on the end of them. So they do recommend that you lubricate them when you actually screw them in, because they're self-drilling. So I'm just going to spray a little bit of WD-40 on, and I've got my impact driver here with a Torx T30 bit on the end of it. So what I'll do is I'll start screwing all these together. I'm not sure if I'll do all 7, or maybe just the front one and the rear 2 where we need to put a bolt in and put that support bracket on. That'll make it a lot easier to actually lift it up onto the roof of the Ranger, given I'm only here by myself today. I'll see how I go. It's probably not going to be too heavy in reality. I mean, it's 24 kilos, but if it's missing those slats, I can always fit them up on the roof when I'm doing the final assembly. That will allow me to actually bolt it down, get it all sealed onto the roof, and we can fit them in afterwards. Now, these are the 2 back rails. You need to remember to put these bolts in. So I'm just going to slide all 4 into place now before I forget. The inside one, you just slide to the other side, or you just put it on before you put the backbone on. So I've decided to actually do the 2 front ones and 2 back ones. That'll keep it all nice and rigid. And then we've got 3 that we'll put in after we lift it up onto the roof. And then I'm just going to use a socket just to tighten them up so that I know that it's all nice and tight, nice and snug. And more importantly, we're not going to pull out any of the threads and strip it all out with the impact because it is only light aluminium. I don't want to actually destroy any of the mounting points on this particular rack. So now that I've got this side done, I'll just quickly turn the rack around, put the other one on, and now it's just a case of fitting the hardware to the other side. Now it's easy to tell the front from the back, noting that these flanges need to sit out on the front and in on the back. The longer one with the 2 holes here, this is the front. And then the back is obviously the shorter one. And these 2 holes here are to fit the front fairing on. So what I'm going to do is actually fix this all into place. I'm going to fit the front fairing as well, and then it'll be ready to lift up onto the roof. Now I've been doing a few other things during the day, but I've now had a chance to look up how this fairing all fits on. You would think that they would include this as part of the instructions because they get to a little bit. You have one M8 bolt that needs to slide through this front channel on the underside, which actually supports the middle of the fairing itself. So I'll have to disassemble this. So it's just a case of pulling this off. I'll put a little note in the instructions as I go through and assemble this saying when you put the M8 bolts in the rear, you also need to put one in the front for this fairing. And I don't think it will make any difference if you're doing the half height or the full height. Interestingly, they also provide brackets to mount a light bar onto the top of this, even with the full fairing. So I think that's kind of cool. But in our case, we've just got this here. We've got a bracket that goes onto the side, another bracket that goes to the far side, and then there's this middle bracket that goes on and bolts this fairing onto the front support bar so that it's all nice and rigid when you're driving down the road. Now, I have seen this mentioned, but it's not really in the instructions. I've got this roll here, which does look like some PPF. So where this potentially rubs on the roof of the top of the cab, you can put down this strip of PPF just to protect the paintwork from the rubber gasket that sits in between. So I should just be able to squeeze this M8 bolt in through the side. I've left the 2 bolts here just out, so the whole thing's sort of pulled out. Then I can slide this in now, hopefully. There we go. And then we'll just fix this back into place. So you want to position this bolt into the middle. These rails are 1160, so the middle is going to be 580. And if you're double questioning some of your maths, you can actually measure in, mark it, either with some painting tape or just a pen. I find just a pen just to get it located is fine. Measure 580, turn the tape around, measure back in 580, and at least it gives you a bit of a sanity check to make sure that you are in fact in the middle. Now it's just a simple case of putting this narrow bracket on. It goes on over the top. Then you just put your nylock on and fix it into place with a 13mm socket. I'm going to get it firmly into place and then double check that it is in the center. Just double check with the tape measure and then you should be all good. The next step is we want to put these side brackets on, and this bit here with the curve on it, it fits in through the side and it's actually got some captive nuts in it. So you just run your M6 fasteners that have the T30 Torx head in from the outside, tighten them up and do the same on the other side. And now it's just a case of fitting this front panel on. I'll just note that for all the nylocks, they do provide little cover caps so you can put them on. I'm not going to put this on yet because I want to make sure it's all on properly, get everything all nice and tight, then I can just plop that on later on. Even though it's from the underside, I should be able to get to it without any drama at all. But again, it's just a case of lifting this up. You've got the slots in here so you can adjust it up and down. Then you put in your 5 fixings. So there's 2 on either end, 1 in the middle, and it's pretty much done. Now I'm only going to do these up hand tight now because we will have to adjust it. I don't want to mark this front surface too much. I will put the rubber gasket on it before we put it up on the roof, but it will be in the higher position so then we can adjust it down to how we want it sitting with the roof line of the Ranger itself. But this for now is pretty much the rack assembled, other than those 3 bars through the middle. If you had someone here to help you lift it on, I just assemble the whole lot. And again, you can just go through and double check everything's all nice and tight once these 4 mounting points are all located and secured onto the roof itself. Tomorrow we'll come back and start stripping down the Ranger. because that's where things get really, really interesting. And I will note at this point that this video is obviously broken into chapters. So if you don't have a Wildtrak, you don't need to worry about this. You can skip forward to where we start pulling apart the interior and then go through the full install. But let's try to get you up there so I can show you how easy it is to pull the silver sections off, and then we'll go into the more complicated business. It's a good idea to get a microfiber towel you can put down on your paintwork so you're not scratching anything up. And then essentially what we need is a little pick that we remove this little cap with. Then you have a T40 Torx bit that removes the top T40 bolt that you'll see just through this hole. You remove basically those two on either end. This silver cap comes off, and then you need a little 8mm socket because there's two of these 8mm bolts that sit under this silver rail. So this silver bit all comes off. This black strip underneath also comes off, and that allows access to seal everything up when we put it all back together. It's pretty straightforward, but it could have been a lot simpler in my mind. So you just get your pick tool, and then you'll notice there's two holes at either end. You simply get that in through the hole to release the little cap, and it slides out just like that. So these are the caps that you have on either end. Now you get your T40 Torx bit and release that first bolt that holds and secures the silver portion into place. Note that Ford uses a lot of Loctite on all their fixings, so be gentle, take your time, and try not to strip the head of the fixings in particular out when you're removing all these components. Now we have to do the same with the rear cap. Just slowly release it. And then with the T40, we remove this top bolt. Just like so. And I actually have an issue at the other end, but hopefully this will just pop off.
A few moments later.
And now with both those bolts removed, this silver portion will just lift off like so. Just note that inside the strip will be these two brackets. This one sits up the front, this one up the rear. Just be careful taking it off because they sort of just lock in like so, and they will dislodge. You just got to shift it from side to side and lift it off. I've already got mine off, so I was just replicating it for the sake of this video, but that's just one thing to note. But now it's just a simple case of releasing these 4 bolts, so there's 2 at either end, and that is just with an 8mm socket. They're not in very tight, it's very easy just to undo them. And then the bottom half of the brackets pull out just like that. Then we obviously do the same with these 2 back ones and then remove the rear bracket. These are the mounting points just here. So they're the 2 screw holes that we just removed. And then this silver thing in here is a bolt that goes through the roof and holds the front section of this black strip in. Now there are 2 potential problems you might come across when you're releasing this silver rail. The first, which I had on this corner just before, is that this bolt actually stripped out the nut inside this piece which sits over the top, and this is what holds the silver rail in. You've got another metal piece that goes in, and what happened is the nut just started spinning around inside this aluminium casing. Now because it's all tucked in underneath, you can't get to it, you can't really hold it, and it wasn't very fun, to be honest. So what I ended up having to do was actually drill out the head of this bolt so that I could lift the whole lot off. But that is something that you might come across. I haven't had a problem with any other corner, and it's to do with Ford's real strong Loctite. Ideally, you heat it up to release it, but you can't do it in these components to be able to actually release the Loctite and successfully remove some of the hardware. The really big issue that I have come across in a number of the corners is actually to do with this silver bolt here. So what you have that actually fixes in this black weather strip is a fairly large bolt that goes down through the roof. And this is what this whole exercise has been about. It's about pulling everything off so that we can get to the existing mounting holes, which is what this bolt actually goes through, to then fix our new rack onto. So the next part of this exercise is actually pulling the interior apart so that we can release this bolt, and then we can put the new rack on and fix it all back up into place. Now the big issue is that you'll notice that there's this square section here which is essentially the head of the bolt, it sits in between two aluminium pieces as part of this weather strip. Now, the problem I've been having is that as you release the nut from the bottom, and you've got to put a lot of force on it, which you will see through the next portion of the video, is that this will actually lift up a little bit and strip out the sides of the aluminium. Once that happens, it just spins around and you can't do anything about it. So again, I actually had to drill this out last night when I was pulling all this apart. However, I think I've got a solution, which I used on the back, that worked really, really well. See, what you do is you actually get this piece, which sits over here. You remove the rubber weather strip from it so you can get it to bolt down all nice and flat. And then using the existing hardware we took out, you can actually fix this back into place, and the bottom side of this plate will actually hold the head of the bolt in so that it can't actually lift up a little bit. As you're loosening the nut, the natural tendency is for it to work out of the hole, and it can't spin around. And that will avoid it actually taking out the aluminium portions on the side and just spinning loosely around. You don't have a lot of access down in there, so if that does start spinning, there's no way that you can grip onto it and hold it with the force that you need from underneath to actually release this nut. If you're unlucky, like me, to actually have the nut spinning around inside this, I think all you can really do is actually drill it out, or if you wanted to, you'll have the silver rail going up over here, is actually get a blade and cut through in between the silver rail and this, but that will obviously destroy both of the components. To be honest, I actually did damage the top of the silver bit where the little plug comes out, but I'm not going to use it anyway. And to be honest, I was quite frustrated at that point. But anyway, what I'll do now is I'll spin everything around, and this is all filmed slightly out of kilter because I'm coming up with solutions as I'm doing this video. I'm researching, and this I've never seen, but to me, it actually worked extremely well. So it's going to be yesterday afternoon. I've spun the car around. I was hoping to get out of the direct sunlight coming in and washing everything out. I had a slight audio issue, but I'm going to show you how you can just disassemble a portion of the interior so you don't have to drop the whole headlining, and that gives access to these points from inside so we can pull it all apart and then put it all back together. Once that's all done, we'll come back outside, we'll extract these bolts, pull the weather stripping off, and then we'll go through the process of actually sealing it all back into place so we're ready to install our new roof rack. Now, because we're working around airbags, it's a good idea to disconnect your battery. So it's just a case of getting a 10mm socket onto the negative post of your battery, loosen it off, lift it out of the way, but because it wants to naturally sort of go back towards the post, put a microfiber towel or something like that in between it so it can't make contact again. Now your 12-volt system's disconnected, and we can go through and start pulling apart all the little bits and pieces inside. Now I must say I've been trying to avoid buying a system where you have to drop the headliner down. As it turns out, even though it says no drilling, you still need to drop the headlining down for this particular system. And really, in all honesty, for any bolt-on system that you're putting onto the roof of pretty much every dual cab ute. Anyhow, I have done a fair bit of research looking at what you need to pull apart, what you don't need to pull apart, and I came across a really good video of a guy over in the States who was actually installing one of these onto a Ranger Raptor, and he actually discovered that you don't need to pull the whole lot apart. So I'm going to reference that. I'll put a little link down in the video below because that might help you out as well. But in his second round through, he actually came up with a fairly good way of just discreetly pulling a few trims apart to actually gain access up through here. And then when we get to the back, up into the back corner of the cab. So essentially what we need to do is we need to remove the sun visor. You can actually leave the hook here. It doesn't really impede access up through the side. So we peel that off, we take the grab handle off, we pull this trim out, we'll have to undo the grab handle on this side. I didn't have to worry about the grab handle on the driver's side. So these two grab handles have to come out. And then it's just a case of actually pulling this rubber seal down so that we can actually get up inside this sort of roof cavity here in amongst all the airbags and everything like that. So all you really need are some trim removal tools. I've also got a flat blade screwdriver, some Torx bits, and then I'm pretty sure for these grab handles, it's a 7mm socket as well, but I'll update us as we're all going through. The first thing you need to do is actually pull these little covers off, which I just did by hand. I didn't even use a trim removal tool at all. And that gives us the mounting points for the actual grab handle itself. So you just get your socket in. And just like that, you remove the grab handle. This top bolt wasn't even tight, so we'll tighten that up when we go and put it all back together. It's a good idea, and I tend to do this. Just leave your fixings inside every component that you're taking off. And if you do remove them, just put them with that component, just so you don't end up with a pile of bolts that you don't know where they go. The next thing we're going to do is actually pull this sun visor off. Now, I've got it here. There is actually this little clip that goes around the outside of it. You just basically pluck that off, and I would use a trim removal tool for that. And then you'll see on here, there's a split in it. So you actually then maneuver it so that you can remove it off from around the actual hook that comes out for the visor itself. And then holding this into place is two T20 Torx bits. So you'll find there's a lot of Torx bits in these new cars. You just simply loosen it off. And these will actually fall out, so don't lose them. And the sun visor is out. The next thing we need to remove is the grab handle. So you pull this down, and this is where I use my flat blade screwdriver. There's a little tab that you can see in here where the springs are. You just flick that forward. You have to be a little bit aggressive with these ones just to pop them out. So there's a T30 bolt on either side. You just loosen them off and it should come out as well. The good thing is you don't need any real specific tools other than these Torx bits. Now it's really hard to show, sorry, but here is essentially the grab handle, and in there you can see the Torx bit. Now everything pretty much stays encapsulated in most things you pull apart, so that you can't lose too much really. But that's the grab handle off. And the last thing we need to do in this corner is then remove this pillar trim here. Now on the top here, there is a plastic tab that goes into a metal clip. And that is pretty typical for most of the fixings inside here. You just need to yank on this and it will come off. Just like that. Then we can lay this down out of the way. And then now you can actually get in behind here. And all you really need is enough room to be able to get a socket through onto the nut of the bolt that is holding in those black strips on our roof. Or if you've got a ute that doesn't actually have that yet, there'll probably still be a nut there holding in the black trim. But it's just a simple case of undoing that. The hard bit is going to be putting it all back together because you can't really see what you're doing up in there. And you need to be able to get the nut and the washer on to be able to secure this all back up into place. Now in the rear is actually really easy. We simply remove this grab handle. We pull down the seal, pop off this trim, and we've got okay access in through the back of the headliner here. So just like before, you want to pull your grab handle down, and I know you can't see it terribly well, but trust me, it's here. I just tried to adjust the light, but I don't think it's going to be too much better in here. So just work with the descriptions for now. All we need to do now is actually remove this portion of seal. Now to remove this rear trim, once you've got the seal out of the way, I unplugged the demister because I don't want to go pulling those wires out or anything like that because they run in hard behind this back black trim that runs down the side. Now you can always fold the seats down. However, I found on the other side, you can actually loosen this off without that. And it's just a simple case of pulling on the trim to release those tabs so that you can pull the hood lining down and get access into this back corner. And just like that, you can move that out of the way. And again, you can get your socket up through the back here. You do have to pull it down just a little bit, but you should be able to flex it enough to be able to access the bolt, or in particular the nut from under here. Now again, it's going to be whether or not we can actually manipulate and feed the nut in back from underneath here, not being able to see, and sort of guide it into place with the bolt that's going to be coming back down. And of course, at this critical point, my microphone decided to not work. So I'm just quickly going to do a voiceover here. What you need to actually undo the nut from the fixing bolt from the underside is a 15mm socket. Now you need to actually pull down the weather stripping here that I've left up. And then it's just a case of sneaking it up through the hood lining, locating where the bolt comes down so you can find the nut. And then you sort of have to feel for the socket to go onto the bottom of the nut in and around the actual airbag that runs in behind the hood lining there. It's actually not too bad. You can feel around, and once you've got the rough location, it clips on, and then you can start the process of actually undoing this nut. Now, at this point, I hadn't actually discovered or even thought about putting that aluminium piece back over the top. And fortunately, I didn't actually need it in this instance, but you can see here there's quite a lot of force required to actually release that nut and undo it from the bolt that is holding the moulding in along that roof strip above. And now that we have a way of securing the head of the bolt along the top of the moulding, you could probably actually get these nuts out with an impact driver now. I would actually consider trying that, because that will take a lot of the effort out of actually using the wrench to release the bolt and actually wind the nut down the bolt so you can release it from the underside of the roof area. And here you can see the nuts come out, no dramas at all, of course, and that was a huge relief to me. And the process is pretty much the same in the rear. Just note that in this back corner, it's a little bit tricky to get around the bulk of the airbag, and you've got to just manipulate the angle of the socket and the extension to get onto the nut at the bottom of the bolt. Here I point out that the hook won't make too much of a difference to access into this back corner, and you can actually see the hood lining deflecting and creasing just a little bit, but once it all goes back into place, that all disappears. So there's no dramas there. It's just about locating that nut and getting the whole process started. And it was halfway through the process that I discovered actually putting that black cast aluminium piece back over the top. And that, in all reality, solved all my issues with removing these nuts. It made it so much easier. It's certainly turning. I think it's working. Ah, yes. And success. There is our nut. So that worked incredibly well. What I'll do is I'll update the video before we start this process, and I'll show you exactly what you need to do to really easily release these bolts. And then you can extract the bolt out of the roof itself. It's all intact. We didn't have to drill it. And I think that was a really good solution for actually making sure these don't spin around in the top of this moulding. And I've just got some isopropyl alcohol, because this will be the next part of the exercise. Just plop that up here. And this moulding, the only thing that's securing it into place now is some double-sided moulding tape. And it's quite easy. You can just actually very gently lever it up from the front. There's nothing holding the front portion in. And then very gently, without actually bending the moulding itself, just lever it up off the roof. Just like so, and it's all out. And now what you'll be left with is some dirt. And on this side, a lot of the double-sided tape actually stayed on the roof of the cabin itself. On the other side, most of it actually stayed on the moulding, but you need to actually obviously strip all this off just by peeling it up. It's probably going to be easier if it stays on the moulding, in all honesty, but we want to get all of this off. So you need to scrub it. Try not to put a blade on it. You want to use a plastic blade if it does actually get really hard to get this off. And then we actually spray with some isopropyl cleaning alcohol to clean this whole joint out so that we can actually stick the moulding back in. But more importantly, we need to seal around the holes in each of the four corners. So what I've been doing here is actually using a trim removal tool. You can sort of just pick up the corner. You just want to get the end of the actual adhesive itself. I've got a loose bit there, so that's good. And you want to get all this tape off, so you need to be able to scrape it. Hopefully you've got a thumbnail. And I find with a thumbnail, you can sort of just pick it from a corner and then peel it up. It's a little bit fiddly, but that got rid of most of it from there. And you'll slowly be able to work it off from the rails of the roof itself. And then the last little step is just to spray in some isopropyl or cleaning alcohol. Give it a good wipe down. That will remove any contaminants, any residual glue, dust, anything like that, and have it all ready for both our sealant and the double-sided moulding tape we'll use to put the moulding back in. The next step is to prepare the underside of the moulding so they're ready to be reinstalled. Now, I've already cleaned them up with some isopropyl alcohol. I've got rid of any residue. And while Frontrunner will send you some double-sided moulding tape, I cut it in half so that the width was actually right to go onto the moulding, but it was still way too short. So I've actually gone and bought this Gorilla moulding tape, which has the same issue. It's twice as wide as what you need. So I'm actually going to cut it down the middle, put it on the underside of the mouldings, and then we'll have the right length strip to actually securely fix them onto the roof. So it's just a case of getting a sharp knife. You have to actually extend it out a fair way and then just run around a few of the layers. Alternatively, you could roll it out and use a straight edge, but remember that there's only the protective film on one side. So we're trying not to get too much dust on this while we're actually cutting the tape down. And if we flip the moulding over, you can see a witness line where the old double-sided tape used to run. So we're going to start there and we're going to end up the other end. And you just want to peel off one side. Run it around. Try to get it as straight as you can. And then you can just cut it off really carefully with a sharp knife. And now you can see it's all neatly installed. And then we'll just peel this tape back in one corner when we put it up on the roof. Then we can press it down, remove the rest, and we know it's going to stick down in the right spot without having to sort of jiggle it around while we're putting it up there. Now you might be able to find some smaller tubes of neutral cure silicone. This is a 75 gram one that I actually got when we were up in Cairns. So I'm not sure if I want to use it. It still feels all right inside. And I've actually run out of the black Bostik V60. So I had to duck down to Bunnings this morning and I've actually got some Davco black neutral cure silicone, which is fine to use inside and outside. So it should work for this purpose. If you can, I do highly recommend the Bostik V60. But given this won't be actually out in the sun, we just want to seal around the points where we're mounting everything back in. This should be fine. I do think a 75 gram tube, if you can find it, will actually work for this exercise that we're doing here. So I'm going to run with this. So let's go back up on the roof and seal it all in. We'll just quickly put some sealant on. I've actually got some paper towel in my pockets just in case I make a mess. But remember that you're not going to see any of this. So you want to put enough in that it's going to seal around, but you don't want it squishing out all over your paintwork either. So we'll just put this on. Work it around the hole. And note that it will squish out once our moulding gets fixed into place. The good thing about neutral cure is that obviously it doesn't eat into the steel bodywork, which is why you don't use an acidic cure silicone or anything like that. I don't think you should use a polyurethane because if you do need to disassemble this, you might cause a little bit of damage and start ripping paintwork off. But the neutral cure takes a little while longer to actually set and skin. So you've got a little bit of working time, which is good for me when I'm making videos because it tends to take about twice as long as what it would for you if you're doing this at home. So I'll go and do the back hole now, then we'll bring the moulding over, sit it into place, and this side should be done. Now with these mouldings, there's a bit of felt that sits on the inside of the roof. So that's a good way of telling left to right. In my case, my back one's a little bit damaged on the other side, so that was really easy. Now what you do is you actually peel off just a little bit of the tape, so it's hanging out once you push it down. I've got this from a lot of guys that put body kits on drift cars and stuff like that, and it means you've got a little bit of wiggle room to get this into place before you actually pull the tape and fully bond it down onto the roof surface. But it's just a simple case of putting this on. We'll line up the back because it sort of clicks in. Push this into place. And now we'll pull this tape out to actually bond this middle section onto the roof. Just double check either end to make sure it is sitting right. I did have to just pop this up and move it forward. I'll pay a little bit more attention when I do the other side. Now, before we flip this rack over so we can put it up on the roof, I need to install this pinch weld style seal that goes along the bottom end of the fairing on the front of the roof rack itself. Now, if you look at the profile, it sits like this. You've got the bulb, what they call it, the bulb of the seal, which is the rubber part. And then you've got the pinch weld, which is the stiffer part. So the fairing actually goes into this section, and then the bulb part sits on the inside. So all you see from the outside is actually the pinch weld along the front of the fairing. We'll just quickly feed that in. Go over it a few times to make sure it's pushed all the way in. You could also use a rubber mallet just to tap it in, but really you can just go along with your hands, push it into place. Now we're ready to flip the rack over and put it up on the roof. So obviously check that you've got it around the right way so you don't lift it up there and find us back to front. I've put a little camera over there just in case we got a bit of carnage, but this would be a lot easier with two people. I'm going to try my best to get it up there. I've got the towels in place, and the idea is to put it up, lay it down, and hopefully I can just slide it across. Let's see how it goes. I just quickly tape the towels down because it's a little bit windy today. But I'm going to gently set this down. Then my aim is to slide it onto these bulk towels. There we go. Now I can gently remove the towels and get this into position. So that, in all honesty, wasn't too hard. I did have to get it over the aerial, and I did forget to buy a little stumpy aerial. So that's something I'll link into the description below. But I forgot one thing. I forgot to put these braces on. I'm sure that's a lot easier to do when it's upside down on the table. But the main thing to note with these braces is that the writing that's etched into it actually goes towards the front of the vehicle. So in this case, this will be the driver's side brace that goes in, and then the mirror reverse of that has this etched writing in it, that will be on the passenger side. So it makes it all nice and easy to install and to make sure you don't get these mucked around, given that the holes are offset to the rear of these particular brackets. So those brackets were pretty easy to put on. I've left them a little bit loose at the moment just so we can shuffle this backwards and forwards. And if you can see in here, they actually sit on top of the feet of the main backbone that sits in through here. But we want to get it mounted onto the roof first. So let's talk through all the fixings, packers, and bits and pieces that we've got to work through to work out how we're going to mount these four corners onto the top of the roof. So Frontrunner gives us all these packers, and it's obviously to suit a number of different applications. Now, with the Wildtraks that have the rail up on top, and you've got the little fixings that we're sort of manipulating and working with that black moulding, they say to use these if you read and actually zoom in on the instructions. And they also say to use two of these little 10mm packers underneath these. But if you start layering them all up, you notice that they don't really work. And here I was talking about how I was actually going to use the thinner plates, which are also shown in the same set of instructions. However, after experimenting on the passenger side, I don't think any of this is required. And I simply only use those really small 10mm spacers essentially as crush washers, which actually worked really well and looks so much neater than what they were implying in their instructions. But I need to show you something that has really been a game changer for installing this rack. So let's talk about the bolts. Now, the one other change you'll notice, given that I've stacked all the bolts and the hardware up, is that they give you these M8 bolts. You have a washer on top and you stack everything in. You've got the spacer. You'd normally have a washer on the bottom and a nylock nut. Now, given that we've got this real confined space to actually get up in between the roof lining and the side of the airbags and everything, I've actually swapped over to this flange nut. So it's got a serrated flange on the back of it. I don't know if you can see that all that well here, but it's an M8 flange nut, which again, I'll link down in the description. It also goes on to the provided M8 bolts, but more importantly, it will actually sit into the socket so we can push it up. We don't have to worry about the washer falling off and getting lost somewhere inside the interior and rattling around further down the track. And I think this will solve the issue. Now, this is more like the factory nut that Ford uses. So it'll actually bond and tighten onto the underside of the roof. This should work perfectly fine. While it's not a nylock, I will actually put a little bit of Loctite on it to make sure it does stay in place and doesn't rattle around in the future. Because obviously if these come loose, any of your hardware comes loose, you're pulling the interior apart again to tighten it all back up, which won't be really fun. But to me, I think this will be the easiest solution for getting this all mounted onto the roof using these little spacers. Let's see how it all goes. Okay, let's change the angle up a little bit because boy, did we have fun on the other side. But I've learned a few things, so I'm going to show you on this side how I've simplified the whole installation down. We're now just using this little 10mm spacer, and that is essentially a crush washer that you're putting in between the feet here and the black moulding that runs up along the roof line of this particular Ranger. I've also wrapped a piece of wood in a microfiber towel just to lift it all up because we need to get the sealant in here to seal all the different levels as we pull this thing down. And I had a bit of a rant because a lot of the components here don't work with this particular moulding. The whole system of bolting this down, in my opinion, should be a lot better for something that is custom made for this particular vehicle. So what I'll show you here will work. We've just got to put a little bit of extra silicone in around the front here just to keep it all nice and tidy. The other thing I did do when I first started this process is I actually put all 4 bolts in through the holes so that when we lift the rack up, it didn't want to slide off the roof. So the first step is to fill in between these 2 spaces with silicone, and that is where that rectangular bolt sat in the first instance. So we're going to put a fair bit of silicone in here because this is the point where we certainly don't want any water coming through. And then I actually coat up through here just to make sure there's a good bond and surface between here and the feet of the rack itself. On the back, I haven't worried about it quite so much, but you've got a lot of driving rain that comes in through here. You want to keep this as dry as you possibly can, noting that it's only the hole that goes through that technically needs to be waterproofed. Ford actually has it designed so the water can sort of get inside this moulding and drain back out. So that's not an issue, but you want to try to keep it as watertight in there as you possibly can. So now we actually put in our little 10mm spacer. Squash that into place. And then just to be sure, I'm going to put a tiny bit of silicone back on top of that. So the next step is obviously we need to put this wing on. So I'm going to put a little bit of silicone in around this junction here. And then we sit our wing over the top. And it's got a little tab in the back to locate it. And that essentially seals those layers as we work our way up. Now what I'm going to do is actually run a little bit of silicone around between the head of the bolt and where the washer is going to seat to seal that up. And I'm also going to put a little bit just in here where the bottom side of the washer is going to sandwich up against these mounting plates. And I actually covered the hole because the bolt will actually push all that sealant down through all the layers when we actually anchor it onto the roof of the Ranger itself. So now we put our bolt through, and it's just a case of trying to line everything up as we go down. Try not to get silicone everywhere. If you get some on your fingers, make sure you wipe it off. Now we can pull this out, and the whole lot will sit down. Now what I'm going to do at this point is just get some paper towel and just wipe off any little bits and pieces that have sort of come out. But we need to go and do the back one, bolt it all down before we do our final cleanup, and a little bit of a tidy around the front. Noting that the other 2 holes where the silver rail bolted on, they don't go down into the cabin. So you don't really need to worry about water ingress there. But I just run a bit of silicone through just to bond this down and to make sure no driving rain is going to get into this hole that does definitely go down inside. So now we put our little spacer in, squish that down. It's going to put a little bit more silicone around the hole area. And then what I also did was I just reached in from behind here. Just got to move my ladder quickly and put the silicone around the hole in here as well. We'll now do the same with the bolt again, and we can put it back into place. And again, you want to keep that brace a little bit loose so that you can get all this mounted down and then just tighten it up once everything is all tightly and in the correct place. Just remove your packer again, squash it down. You'll see a little bit ooze out here. That's perfectly fine. You're going to expect that. And again, I'd rather a little bit of silicone to come out rather than not have enough there and have a point where water might find its way down in through that hole. Now that I've pushed the bolt down, we're ready to duck inside, and I'll show you how easy it is to actually mount this in, just using those little access spots we've got. And I think the key is using those different nuts. It makes a really big difference. So I'll meet you back inside. Now, sorry about the lighting in here, but this is the best I can do at this point. Now, what you need for this is really, really simple. You just need a 13mm socket. Now, ideally, it's a deep socket. My deep sockets are on a 1/2 inch drive. So to start off with, and I think this is the easiest, start off with a 1/4 inch drive. So the thinner one that you've got, that makes it a lot easier to get in, up, under, and locate the bolt. I've then got another 13mm socket on a wrench that's up on the roof so that we can tighten it all up once we all get started. But all you really need to do at this point is to feed this up through the little hole in the hood lining that we had. I'll just pull this back down. And you can sort of see the witness mark where we were up here before trying to pull all this apart. Then we want to duck our socket in up through here, put our hand on the bolt, so that way you can sort of feel from the top and the bottom. Now I think we're on. You just got to jiggle around because it'll be on a slight angle. Start it off with this. And now we're at the point where the actual short or standard socket won't reach any further because the bolt is a little bit longer. And I say to use this because particularly on the back, you've got to get in behind the airbag. So we're finished with this now. Now we swap over to our deep socket, and I just need to locate that bolt again. And now we just fasten it from top and bottom, and you're pretty much done. And I find you just finish it off from the top side because that nut is digging into the roof and it's secured really, really well. So that wasn't all that hard at all. Now let's quickly go to the back, get that mounted. Then all we need to do is really tidy up the outside. Now it's the same pretty much back here. You just need to locate roughly where you went in last time. And again, this is really where the 1/4 inch makes a huge difference because it's just locating the bottom of that bolt and getting the right angle so that the thread will take. And then once the nut's worked its way up, it's really, really simple. So we'll just duck in behind here again. Same thing, just holding the top of the bolt so I can feel what's going on here. So we've got the nut started, and I did find putting the socket wrench on from the top made it a lot easier because you sort of push that bolt down. Now we just finish it off with the deep impact. And just like that, the roof rack is now securely mounted. So now we're nearly finished with the silicone. You'll note that there's a little gap on the front. You could probably leave that, but I'm just going to run a little bead around that just to tidy it up. It's literally an L shape that runs from the inside and back around just to cover up a little bit of a gap that there is between the foot and the recess for where the silver rail actually mounts in. These silicone finishing tools you get from Bunnings are really good. And then you just want some soapy water. So spray that around. We'll spray this. And then we're just going to give it a bit of a wipe just to shape it. And then I'm going to give it another bit of a spray and just try to tidy up that silicone the best I possibly can. Just so it looks all nice, neat and tidy. Now we'll keep going over this a little bit, including getting a cloth down to get it off any that sort of just come out through the sides, just to tidy it all up. Now that's a lot neater. It looks quite presentable. and is much better than having it sitting on those raised packers. I'm just going to tidy up the back now. I'm going to put the inside back together. You probably don't need to see that. It's just a reverse of pulling it all apart. And the camera views aren't the best in there anyhow. If I do come across something, I'll let you know. But we'll meet tomorrow and we'll run through the system, how you put accessories onto it, and how Frontrunner varies from some of the other racks. While there's a few negatives, there's a few positives, such as being able to just slot things straight in and out without having to pick them up and try to get bits and pieces out of the tracks themselves. So I'll meet you tomorrow morning, and this should be all pretty much done. So I got most of the interior back together last night. And again, I didn't film too much of it because it was really hard to do. The only things that I came across were obviously putting these pillar molds back in, and the same with the back pillar molds. And that is, you'll see these little black tabs sticking up, just like here in this little shot. Now there's these metal receivers that actually sit inside the pillar bodywork themselves. What I would do there is actually pull them out, slide them onto the plastic. So you slide them on, and you might just need to adjust the teeth in them a little bit because they'll pull out when you're actually pulling the trim off. And then you can actually pop it back into place. That will make the install a lot easier for you, and you're not trying to force those plastic tabs onto the metal teeth. It actually goes together from factory with that metal on the plastic, and then that metal clips into the slots in the side of the pillars. In the rear here was pretty much the same, and that's where I learned you just got to pull those little clips out, put them on the tabs, and then you can pop it all back in. You might just need a long screwdriver to get a few of the little tabs back into place. But one thing I did find is there's a separation just here on the lower portion to the top portion. Now on that side, they never came apart, but I know that it did come apart on this. I forgot about it. And there's a little plastic clip that sits over the top of the tang, I'll call it, that actually goes in. Just as I was pushing it in, I heard it fall off, and it's now down inside here somewhere. So that is a little bit annoying. I'll have to pull this apart, flip the seat down, and see if I can fish that out. But otherwise, it all went back together really, really well. Now, you'll probably see in some of the videos that there was a bit of a crease line here when I was trying to get the socket up. That's all disappeared now that it's all gone back together. All this went back together really well, and to be honest, it was pretty straightforward other than putting those tabs back in, which is always the case with reinstalling trim inside a vehicle. So anyway, that's that. What do I think about the rack? Well, let's head up the top and I'll give you my thoughts. I'm actually really, really impressed. It is solid as a rock. And while we had those little niggling issues installing it, I actually think the quality is really, really quite good. The finishes on here are a lot better than most of the racks that I've had to the point. And I would say it's very, very similar to the ARB bar that we've got on here. Now, ARB updated their coatings about 2 years ago when they come up with the new generation of bar that they fit to most of the four-wheel drives these days. And I would say the powder coat finish is very, very similar to that. So from my point of view, they match in quite nicely. And I have to say again, now I'm up so close that I really, really like the durability that this powder coating sort of eludes. Feels like it's going to wear really, really well. It's not a really thin coating that you see on a lot of racks, and it's justifying the headache of actually mounting these into the corners. Now, the one thing I like about the slat size that run through this rack is that they're quite narrow, so it makes it quite easy to strap things down. But more importantly, you can get in under the slats to actually clean the roof, which is one thing I've been worried about with a platform style rack on the roof of a vehicle. Makes it incredibly hard in most cases to get underneath and clean, particularly when they've got those really wide slats with little gaps in between. If anything, this is a reverse where we've got narrow slats and big gaps in between. So for me, that is a really big bonus that should make maintaining the vehicle a lot easier. Now, functionality wise, I think it's going to work incredibly well. Because I can slot things in and out, I do need to resolve how I install the awning back on. What I'm trying to do is have it half up, half down, and that will work incredibly well. Otherwise, I have taken it for a quick drive. We had to go out for a Father's Day breakfast, so you know this video is fairly current. I drove out to the boys' school, which is about half an hour away from here. A little bit of 80 to 90 kilometre hour driving, and I would say the wind noise from this is actually really, really good. It's hard to tell. I am going to go for a quick drive up a highway because I think around that 100, 110 mark is when you start really hearing the noise, but this pretty much makes no noise at this point. The only thing I haven't done is I haven't adjusted this front fairing and I haven't installed the PPF through the bottom here. So that is something I still need to do, but it's incredibly easy just to remove these 5 bolts. I can put the PPF on. I'm just waiting for the weekend when Michelle's around so we can line it all up and get it sitting on there properly. And then I can adjust this down. But as it sits now, the actual bulb of the seal is actually sealed onto the roof. I haven't noticed any whistling, any noises at all. I would say that the Vortex bars on the factory roof rails were a lot noisier than what this currently is. So anyway, let me go and get my other little box of tricks out. We'll start mounting a few things up and I'll show you how easy it really is. Now, the one thing I really like about these Slimsport racks is that the rails are open on the ends, which makes it incredibly easy to put accessories in and out and to change your setup depending on what you really want to do. Now, as I mentioned, these are quite narrow slots, and the basic ecosystem that Frontrunner uses on these Slimsport racks is a very simple one, to be honest, and that is an M8 bolt. So they're basically designed that you can slide an M8 bolt into the tracks, and you can see here how easy it is just to slide it in and out, and you don't have to fiddle around with trying to find a rack with slots in it, like the open slots, or actually find little mounts that will go down inside these slots on an angle and twist around or anything like that. You simply need some M8 hardware and it works perfectly fine. Then to fix things down, they've obviously got a washer, a nylock, and then the same black caps that go on over the top. Now, if you didn't want to use the Frontrunner hardware, you can simply use the M8 bolts you get from Bunnings. So these are the stainless M8 bolts. I think this is about 20 mil long. And we're going to use this to actually mount our awning down. Same thing, it just slides in and it makes it incredibly easy. So the core of my system is actually going to be the Frontrunner tie downs. You can get these in stainless or just the black. I've got the black so they blend out a little bit. And my intention is not to leave these up on the rack full time. I'm going to take them out and only put them in when I need to use them. But it's the same thing, you've just got the M8 bolt, and then instead of having a normal washer on it, it's got a nylon washer, which won't mar up the top of the rack so much, and you won't get all those little marks that you typically get on a lot of these racks. So just note that as well when you're installing these, that you can turn the bolt around and that will actually position these fasteners depending on how you want them. And that will play a pretty important role when you're actually strapping stuff down onto the roof. So let me put 4 of these in and I'll show you what my first setup is going to be. And of course it has to be my double swag. That is the primary reason why I bought this rack. And this is actually a June swag inside a King's bag, because I actually bought 2 of these bags because the other one says for all our pillows, blankets, sleeping bags and stuff like that. And we've got a matching pair that can go on either side. So that is the first main reason why I got this rack fitted. And you can see the bars along the bottom, they support the swag really, really well. And you don't have that droop that you get with your typical crossbars where you're trying to support something as long and floppy as this on 2 horizontal bars. So that ticks a really big box for me. They do sit up fairly high and obviously the wind's going to buffet them and stuff like that, but that actually works pretty well. Now these are actually Frontrunner stratchets that I've had for quite some time as well. You would have seen these back in one of our original videos on the first version of the tub rack that I put on, and these work really well. I use these when we're up on Fraser just to quickly tie down our chairs and bits and pieces onto the back of the tub rack, and I've actually been using them quite a lot. I've got 2 pairs of these, so that'll be perfect for this little setup when we're doing our simple camping with the rooftop tent, a swag, and our other bag full of all our gear. Now I've also got 2 tubs that I've set up for our, what I'll call more solo camping trips. So I've created a little kit that is separate from the caravan and the camper trailer with all the things we need so we can just quickly chuck them in the back. I do have plans to do a video on that as well, and I'll probably tie that in with how I mount the rooftop tent onto our tub rack to show you our more compact camping setup that we've been working on over the last, I would say, probably 12 to 6 months. Now it's been a terrible winter this year. It has been raining, hence I've been delayed with videos. And if it's not raining, it's not windy. And if the weather's actually half good, we're out trying to catch up with soccer games at the moment. So it has been a real headache to produce content because it's been so wet. We're up at Hard Head in a few weeks, so I can't really test this out. But when we get back, I'm going to do a trip just with the swags, the rooftop tent, get out. Spring is the perfect weather for that. And I'm really, really keen to check this out. Let me pull this off. I'll show you the Starlink mini mount, and then some of the other little accessories that I've been sort of buying and collecting on the side that will work really, really well with this rack. Now, the Starlink mini mount is actually quite interesting. They say it's removable, but it's only semi-removable. But I'm going to adjust that by using 4 of the eye bolts, and that will make it 100% removable. And I'm sure you can imagine how I'm going to do that. But essentially, they provide one side that actually bolts down. So you put in your bolts. We'll put it over here so you can see on the video properly. This side goes on, and then you normally put your no-lock nuts, washers, and everything like that on. But I'm actually going to put 2 eyelets on this side as well. Then you can just slide it along to wherever you need it positioning-wise. So we'll put it over there somewhere. And then we do the same for the opposite side. And they're essentially using these eyelets as the removable function, because without the use of tools, you can quickly loosen this off or tighten it. And your Starlink simply goes in like so. You lock it all down and it's ready for transit. Now, I do want to test this down on the lower rack just to see if it will work. So how about we just take it down and see how it will actually work on the Triple M tub rack as well. So how I would get it working on the Triple M rack is that I'd mount it to the outside rails. That gets me my 2 points without having to worry about the slat spacing at all. One of the slats will obviously line up because I just line one of them. And then the issue is the 4th one doesn't quite marry up. But I'm going to work on something to see if I can get this sitting, maybe even up the back. Probably doesn't make that much of a difference, because I think when we're doing a lot of touring, it'd be handy to have it somewhere down here for the most part, because then I can just feed my cable down into the power station because I've got that mounted down under the tub, rather than having to route the wiring down and into the tub. It just makes the temporary installation a lot easier. But I think this is actually, for all intents and purposes, a fairly good product for the price, because around that $70 to $80 mark, because while it's more expensive than your cheaper sort of slide-on single clamps that go on either side, it's a little bit more secure. It's a bit more robust in my opinion, and I think it will work a lot better. And in my case, it's very easy to remove because of how Frontrunner set it up with these eyelets. But for anyone that's looking at it, this might give you an idea on how you can actually use things like that to quickly take accessories on and off. So now let's go into a few of the little fun things, and then we'll wrap this video up. Now, one of the cool little trinkets you can buy, again for around about $10, is a bottle opener. So you can just simply slide that into the side, screw it down, and then you've got a bottle opener on the roof rack of your vehicle, which I think will be pretty handy. I've just got to work out where I want to put it. Ideally, it's on the other side, but that's where the awning will eventually be. But that is kind of cool. And then they actually had these little GoPro camera mounts. So the same principle applies. You just slide it down into the rack and you can move it around on the rack to all different positions. And then you can obviously mount up your action camera and get some cool footage while you're driving around. So I've taken it one step further and come up with another little system, noting how simple they mount everything into these rails. And this could be a solution for you. And for me, it's going to make our life a lot easier while we're documenting some of our travel videos that I'm really starting to get into, even though it's a huge amount of work. So I've got this cool adjustable arm from Small Rig. You just buy them on Amazon. You can adjust it. It's got balls that all tighten up when you clamp it. But the thing that unlocked it is you can actually buy these 1/4 inch, which actually goes into the thread for pretty much all your camera mounts, little rectangular nut that actually slides perfectly into the tracks of the Frontrunner Slimsport rack. So if I just put this on quickly, now what I can do is actually really quickly slide my mount into place, lock it down, and I can actually adjust this to get a whole pile of different views. And that to me is going to make life a lot easier. I've actually got a cage for my Pocket 3 that I can also use with this. And more importantly, as you've probably seen in a lot of my videos, I sort of have a habit of hanging the camera out the window. I can actually have this down now. And if I adjust it right, I can sort of face the camera out the side of the vehicle. I can turn it around, do all sorts of things once this is all tightened in properly. And I'll be able to control a lot of the video that we're capturing while we're driving along without having to hang my arm out the window. Now, this is just for me, but it just gives a bit of a idea of some of the accessories you can fit onto these racks and just thinking outside the box a little bit, which is what I really like to do. Now, one potential compromise I'm making with putting a platform rack over the vortex rails we've had on here is that putting the kayak onto this roof before was incredibly easy. Strapping it down, it worked really, really well where it sat over the top of the aerial. I didn't have any issues. And this, I think, will be a little bit more complicated. As well as going to pick up bits of timber, ladders, all that sort of thing, I don't want to mark up the finish that is so good on the top of this rack. So I found these down at Bunnings. These are your grunt straps that go over your roof bars, and they actually have little Velcro straps. So you can actually wrap them around the rails themselves, and then we should be able to actually lie the kayak over the top. It'll just save the top of the rack actually marking up while you're driving along. If you want to be a bit of a cheat, you probably only have to do 2 of them. You don't have to do all 4, but I think it's a good thing to have just lying in the back of your ute. You could even put them in behind the seat so they're ready to go. And I've got a kit that I carry around pretty much all the time with straps and bits and pieces like that. And so that's essentially the install of our Frontrunner Slimsport roof platform. I actually really like it. While it was a little bit of a pain to install, a lot of that revolved around having to pull the interior apart, which I was really, really trying to avoid. But I think we found some real nifty solutions in there. So I like doing all the research, and hopefully this will help anyone out that's looking to either fit this particular rack, because obviously there's a few quirky things with the mounts and stuff like that, or putting any roof platform onto one of these Next Gen Rangers. So anyway, I know this video is going to be quite long because there was a lot to go through in the end. I really hope you enjoyed watching it. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. We've actually done a fair bit of content on the Ranger. I've still got a little bit more to go, but I'm going to get back onto our caravan and camping stuff as well. I'm pulling the Journey out in a few weeks to clean off the awning, so I'm going to show you some tips and tricks there. And a lot of people have been asking for us to go through how we actually store things inside the Journey, so that's going to be its own video as well. Otherwise, I've got my camper trailer in there, well, 2 camper trailers. We've got our Swan we need to finish a few projects on, and I've got a camp trailer build I really want to get into. I've been waiting for a few things to work themselves out, and I think now we've got the opportunity where we can reset, we can go through, we can plan out the rest of the year and into next, and we've got some really cool stuff coming down the line. So I'm going to leave it there. I thank you all for watching, and as I always say, get out there, stay safe, have fun, and we'll catch you next time.